The floor waxer hummed like a dying heart. I watched the lights flicker across the linoleum, reflections of a life that used to belong to someone else, someone named James Carter, father, husband, provider. Now I was just a night janitor at St. Mary's Hospital, mopping up the footprints of people who still mattered. It was around 2:17 a.m. when I saw her. An old woman standing at the end of the corridor, trembling hands gripping a small beige envelope. She didn't belong there. No visitor badge, no sound to her approach, just presence. "Excuse me," she whispered, voice cracked by time. "Are you James Carter?" I froze. No one had said my full name in months, not since the custody hearing, not since my wife, Claire, stood in that courtroom with my wealthy cousin's arm around her waist, telling the judge I was financially unstable and emotionally unfit. I remember her laughter echoing later, outside the courthouse. "Daddies with no money don't deserve kids." Now this stranger's words sliced through the memory. I nodded, slowly. She began to cry, not softly. This was decades of something breaking open. "I've been searching for you for 40 years, she said. "Your mother was my daughter." My chest tightened. I wanted to speak, but the words wouldn't form. She pressed the envelope into my hand. Her fingers were cold, shaking. "Everything is inside," she said. "Everything they took from you." And before I could ask her what she meant, she turned and disappeared into the sterile light of the corridor. I stood there, the envelope heavy as guilt. Inside was something that would burn through every lie I'd ever been told. I didn't open it that night, not because I didn't want to know, but because I already knew it would hurt. Pain had a rhythm in my life. It started when Claire stopped looking at me like I mattered, when her smile became polite, when our daughter, Emily, started calling my cousin Uncle Tom more often than Uncle. When I lost my job, she barely reacted. When I lost our savings, she turned cold. And when Tom offered to help, I should have seen it. The dinners, the late texts, the weekends she said she was visiting her mother. But I didn't, because I wanted to believe I still had a family. Now all I had was this envelope, and a name I barely recognized anymore. At dawn, I sat in my one-room apartment, surrounded by silence thick enough to choke on. The envelope sat on the table, sealed shut with red wax. Old-fashioned, deliberate. When I finally tore it open, I expected some adoption papers or a faded photograph. What I found instead were 3 things: a letter, a photograph of my mother holding a baby, and a folded legal document with a name highlighted in yellow. Not mine. Thomas Carter, my cousin. My cousin wasn't just my betrayer. He was my brother. I didn't tell anyone, not yet. I went to work like usual, mopped the same hallways, ate lunch in silence. But inside, I was unraveling every thread. If Tom knew, he'd hidden it. If Claire knew, she'd played along. It made sense now, how easily she'd chosen him. Same blood, same charm, same face with money behind it. I needed proof. The letter could have been a trick, a cruel joke. So I did what I always did, observed quietly. I requested a copy of Tom's birth certificate from public records. I ran a DNA test with an old toothbrush I'd stolen years ago during a family gathering. I waited. Days stretched thin, nights colder than the floors I cleaned. I watched from a distance as Claire posted photos online. Tom's mansion, Emily smiling in dresses I could never afford. Her captions burned. "Family is everything." I wanted to call, to scream, but I didn't, because real revenge isn't noise. It's silence sharpened to precision. While I waited for the results, I visited the old woman's address from the letter. Empty. The neighbors said she'd passed away the day after she came to see me. That night, I dreamt of her voice. everything they took from you. The results came on a rainy Tuesday. Positive, 99.9%. Thomas Carter, biological twin brother. The next evening I stood outside their house, the mansion. Lights glowing warm through the curtains. A picture of comfort, of false peace. I didn't knock right away. I just watched through the window. Tom pouring wine. Claire laughing. Emily in her pajamas watching TV. A scene that used to belong to me. When I finally rang the bell, Claire's smile faltered the moment she saw me. "James," she said, voice tightening, "what are you doing here?" "Just wanted to drop something off." Tom appeared behind her, casual, confident. "Man, this is unexpected," he said, forcing a grin. "How's life treating you?" I handed him the envelope, a copy of the DNA results, and the letter. No words, just paper. He opened it, eyes scanning the lines. The color drained from his face. Claire looked from him to me, confusion turning to fear. "What is this?" she whispered. Tom's mouth moved, but nothing came out. "I guess," I said quietly, "our grandfather didn't just ruin one life, he created two." I stepped back, watched the shock settle in their eyes like dust after an explosion. Claire reached for Tom's arm. He pulled away. Silence. Perfect. I didn't need to explain further. They could read between the lines, how their affair wasn't just adultery, it was blood. Days later, I received a call from the court. Tom's business was under review, fraud allegations, embezzlement. Claire's lawyer had withdrawn from her custody appeal. The storm had started, and I hadn't lifted a finger. But revenge isn't about destruction, it's about balance. So I went to see them one last time. Tom was sitting in his car, head in his hands, the mansion behind him stripped of its glow. Claire stood in the doorway, mascara smudged, eyes hollow. I walked up slowly, calm. She spoke first. "You knew," she said. "You knew before you came here." I nodded. "I wanted you to see the truth," I said. "Not just about us, but about you." Tom looked up. "You ruined my life." "No," I said. "Our family did. I just gave you the mirror." I turned to Claire. "You once said, 'Daddies with no money don't deserve kids.'" I let the words hang, cold as steel. "Turns out, daddies with no soul don't deserve them either." She flinched. Tom didn't move. I walked away before either could respond. Sometimes silence is louder than any scream. It's been 3 months. The court reopened my custody case. Emily lives with me now in a small rented apartment overlooking the city. She's quieter, older somehow. I don't tell her everything, only that sometimes truth costs more than lies, but it's worth paying for. I visit the cemetery every Sunday. The old woman's grave is there. No flowers, no visitors, just her name carved into stone. Margaret Ellis, my grandmother. I leave a single white rose each time. A thank you for the envelope that changed everything. Sometimes I think about Claire, about Tom, how they must live now under the weight of what they did, of who they were to each other. But I don't smile, I don't gloat. Revenge, I've learned, isn't satisfaction. It's silence that finally stops hurting. I've stopped being James Carter the janitor, stopped being the broken husband. Now I'm just the man who knows the truth, and that's more than enough. The last thing my grandmother said echoes in my mind, softer each time. Everything they took from you, they did, but I took it back, and I never looked back again.